An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with even 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning, all. I'd like to begin this morning's talk with a reading from chapter 31 of the Tao Te Ching. Good weapons are instruments of fear. All creatures hate them. Therefore, followers of Tao never use them. The wise man prefers the left. The person of war prefers the right. Weapons are instruments of fear. They are not a wise man's tools. He uses them only when he has no choice. Peace and quiet are dear to his heart. In victory, no cause for rejoicing. If you rejoice in victory, then you delight in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. On happy occasions, precedence is given to the left. On sad occasions, to the right. In the army, the general stands on the left, the commander-in-chief on the right. This means that war is conducted like a funeral. When many people are being killed, they should be mourned in heartfelt sorrow. That is why a victory must be observed like a funeral. So, first a confession. Yesterday, I really didn't want to give a talk this morning. When war first broke out in Ukraine, like many people, I assume, I became somewhat glued to the news. And then I grew soul weary of it, and I sought distraction and sought to think and feel nothing of it, anything but it. And that is pretty much where I was yesterday as this morning's talk began to loom more vividly in my heart. And I actually flirted with the idea of canceling. Dharma talk canceled on account of war, but that felt impossible or utterly irresponsible. I also had a fleeting moment of, well, maybe I'll talk about something else and then ignore this grotesque giant elephant in the room, and that would be very false. So I couldn't do that. And a rather fitful night, I arose from my bed 5 a.m. this morning and began contemplating the talk. And I feel like I do have something to say now. And I beg your indulgence. I'm not sure how long this talk will go, and maybe a bit longer than others, but I beg your patience that I be permitted to record all of it, even if it does go beyond the usual parameters. May not, I don't know. I have, sketched out what I want to do in my mind, but I don't know how long it will take. So the task this morning is to examine feelings. How are we feeling? How are we to feel now, given what's occurring? And what are we to do in the midst of feeling helpless and fearful and perhaps hopeless? More specifically, what is the Bodhisattva way? What is the way of the Bodhisattva heart in such a circumstance? One of the things that I recalled in preparing for this talk was a long time ago with Norman Fisher. I can't recall if it was a class or a Dharma talk, but it was in question and answer discussion time. I don't remember the theme of the talk or the class, but I just remember that the question of war came up. You know, is war ever justified? And I think justified is the wrong word, although that's the word that's often used, and there's a whole category of thought of just war theory. But for me, anyway, the word just isn't applicable. It's not the right context for that word. Necessary is perhaps a more appropriate word. Is war necessary? And Norman says something that is not terribly popular with contemporary Buddhists, is that, yeah, sometimes indeed war is perhaps necessary. If you have a tyrant bent on ruling the world with violence, what do you do? Except violently resist said tyrant. If you have a person of deep hatred intent upon exterminating an entire race of persons, what do you do? So, given our samsaric world, given our world of confusion, sometimes the flames of samsara may rise to such an extent that our only viable choice from utter conflagration is to fight fire with fire. Violence is always akushala, unskillful, but it may be the only thing that will prevent an even greater manifestation of the akushala mula, the unwholesome roots, from growing and thriving. But also Norman says something which I found very interesting. He said that, yeah, he felt that probably there are circumstances in which war is unavoidable. But at the same time, it's important that there be people that are utterly, uncompromisingly devoted to nonviolence and peace, such as the Amish, such as Mennonites, such as Quakers, such as certain persons and certain movements within Buddha Dharma. That is equally important, that should not be lost. And logically, on a plane of, mathematical logic, this seems like an inconsistency, a paradox. Well, it is a paradox, but it's a paradox that has some meaning to it. And I want to try to explore what that means. That at the same time that we acquiesce to the samsaric storm of countering violence with violence, we mustn't lose the bodhisattva heart. We mustn't lose the deepest sense of what it means to be human. We cannot fulfill ourselves, as Lao Tzu says. We cannot stay human if we don't recognize the grief and the tragedy of even the most inevitable war. The bodhisattva heart is a mystery. It's not something anyone can possess. It's not even something that one could call a capacity of the human. But it is something real, and the person who's on the bodhisattva path, although that person cannot possess the bodhisattva heart, cannot choose to express the bodhisattva heart as an innate human capacity, that person vows to protect and nurture the bodhisattva heart. So it's a mystery. There's a reality to it in which we are in relationship when we undertake the Bodhisattva path and take the Bodhisattva vows, we enter into a relationship with the Bodhisattva heart. We can never have it. We can never even, in a sense, actualize it from our own power. Yet, it's a reality we can be in relationship to, and our job is to protect and nurture the Bodhisattva heart. Now, if that sounds confusing or whatever, obscure, abstruse, Zen Master Dongshan expressed it in a poem he wrote, and I'm not going to try to access the whole poem from memory right now, but because it's not quite so pertinent. But a pivotal verse, that this poem was inspired when he saw his reflection in a river, traditionally. And the pivotal verse is, "You are not it. It actually is you." The prior verse is, "Everywhere I go now, I meet him, or I meet it. You are not it. It actually is you." So on a semantic level, that makes very little sense, maybe. If A equals B and B equals A, they're saying the same thing, right? But he says, no, A does not equal B, but B does equal A. So there's a mystery encapsulated in that. You are not it. It actually is you. So although you cannot possess the Bodhisattva heart, you cannot actualize it from your own agency. You're never, ever separate from it. And that's the mystery. And the way to honor and protect the mystery and nurture the mystery, the way to be in relationship with the mystery is to honor, protect, and nurture the Bodhisattva heart. And then it comes into being from latency. Because you are not it. It actually is you. So, last month we lost a great teacher. Thich Nhat Hanh passed on the 22nd of last month. And he wrote a poem, his most famous poem, expressing the mystery of the Bodhisattva heart. And I'd like to share that poem with you. I think what I'll do is read through it once, and then maybe look at it once again and add some words of commentary to it. The title of the poem is "Call Me by My True Names." Don't say that I will depart tomorrow, even today. I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving, to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding in a stone. I still arrive to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat. who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes the flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names so that I can hear all my cries and my laughter at once, so I can see my joy and pain as one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up. And so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So that's Kai's poem, Thich Nhat Hanh's poem. As I say, it's arguably his most famous poem. In fact, a book of his poems is entitled Call Me by My True Names. And this morning I posted a page that has that poem on it on our Facebook page as a resource for you. So, a little bit of comment on the poem. So the first line, don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. This is a statement of the basic ontological understanding of the nature of reality in Buddha Dharma. Tathata is the Sanskrit word. Suchness is an English translation. Tathata, Thich Nhat Hanh himself translates as always coming, always going. Usually it's translated thus come. So I'm saying that being is not carried over from the past. Being does not go into the future. Being is always arriving. Being is always, I've talked before about the Taoist term ziran, spontaneously arising, that's what's going on. There's only now. It's always arriving. It's impermanent. We are always being born and dying each moment. And as the poem tries to unpack that nature of being, what arises, the question to hold is, what is I? Because the word I repeats in this poem in various ways. So what is this I? Dogen in Uji, the time being, says, the self setting itself out in array is the form of the entire universe. The self setting itself out in array, arriving, manifesting, is the form of the entire world. So this I is one whole being, and it has many facets. It's undifferentiated, and it has differentiation. This is a paradox that lies inherent at the heart of being. So that introductory sentence is kind of like stating the basic truth of the Buddhist understanding of the nature of being. Praticca samutpada, interconnectedness. This whole poem, the theme of interconnectedness, or interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh was like to call it, is inherent in every verse. So, going on a little bit, look deeply. So now he's giving some examples of how the whole universe manifests in each differentiation. You know, look deeply. Every second I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding in a stone. And that jewel hiding in a stone is a metaphor that's used in the Uttara Tantra for Buddha nature. That within all of the transient suffering phenomena of this world is also the heart of Buddha nature, hidden. It's never separate. You know, like I like to say, our true nature is interfacing with our subject-object habit. It's always touching, always right there. It's immediate. It's not something that we learn to acquire. We just somehow pop our head up and see that it's always been present. And so I believe that Tai is referencing that idea in this image, the jewel hiding in a stone, because it's a prevalent image in Uttara Tantra for Buddha nature. I still arrive to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. That's, I think, the key pivotal stanza in this poem. The rhythm of my heart, of your heart, is the birth and death of all that is alive. So the nature of reality is that it's one and differentiated. And each differentiation contains the whole. You know, this is Indra's net is the Hua Yen metaphor for this. That it's inseparable. That, you know, there's no me here and forgive the reference, Putin over there. We are one. On some level, we are one. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. It's not easy protecting the Bodhisattva heart, nurturing the Bodhisattva heart. It's not easy. Eddie Hilson, who I will talk about more later, says, ought we not, from time to time, ought we not from time to time open ourselves to cosmic sadness? So the birth and death, the rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. Cosmic sadness ensues oftentimes when we endeavor to live that reality. And that reality is inaccessible if we are afraid to mourn, if we are afraid to grieve, if we are afraid to recognize the funeral aspect of our human situation at times. I am the mayfly metamorphizing on the surface of a river. I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. So a couple of examples of life feeding on life, a category of what some people would call violence that is inherent in this world, is part of the structure of this world. Buddhist cosmology would suggest that that is because of karma. That karma produces this world, and karma, especially delusional karma, produces the world in which we live, and it has its consequences that are ineluctable, unavoidable. And so the natural course of life feeding on life is indicative of karmic consequence. That's, you know, that's a Buddhist mythological teaching, using the word mythological in its widest and noblest sense. You don't have to believe it literally, but there's something there. But from that image of, if you'll tolerate the term natural violence, he goes into other examples of pain and violence that are not of the natural world. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate, and I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. And the further one about a member of the Politburo, all indicating examples of human callousness and cruelty and violence. If we endeavor to protect and nurture the Bodhisattva heart, we have to recognize our basic human susceptibility to greed, hate, and delusion. That we all have a reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is kind of analogous to its misuse. It's kind of analogous to the misuse of coping mechanisms subsequent to trauma. I was thinking anyway, I don't see if this makes sense to you. In trauma, in childhood trauma, in order to survive, the effects of the trauma have to be pushed down into the unconscious, and various coping mechanisms, alcoholism, sexual promiscuity, other things, may be adapted to keep the pain and the knowledge and the shame of the trauma below the surface of awareness. And that's the wisdom of the organism surviving in that context. However, in later life, without the healing of that trauma, those coping mechanisms are maladaptive and interfere with the flourishing of the person. The reptilian brain, the fight and flight. I'm not a neurologist. I may be misspeaking terminology here, but my understanding, my layman's poor understanding, is the reptilian brain, a survival mechanism that has within it the fight or flight or freeze syndrome, where in response to a threat, that part of the brain is activated, and adrenaline starts coursing through the body, and energy reserves are made available, and one does what one does. When that reptilian brain, when it comes into modernity and is justified through false reasoning, it becomes a maladaptive thing where we have very sophisticated philosophies for justifying our greed, hate, and delusion. I'm not sure how intellectually valid all of that is, but that's my sense, is that we're all susceptible to greed, hate, and delusion. We're all susceptible to slipping into our animalic being in an inappropriate way, in an inappropriate context. We all have the capacity to be a sea pirate. If conditions are appropriate, we may become the sea pirate, because we are one. We are one being, and we are differentiated. And so these examples of non-natural violence not in the natural world, but violence due to human spiritual pathology, I think speak to that the deeds that we abhor are not something that are foreign to our heart. Greed, hate, and delusion is no respecter of persons. It pervades the collective human psyche. And to protect the Bodhisattva heart, we need to acknowledge that. We need to keep the heart of compassion open by recognizing that I am the sea pirate. my heart not yet capable of seeing that I am the 12-year-old girl as well, and loving. So he, like I say, he offers the example of the member of the Politburo and the person who has to pay his debt of blood, dying slowly in a labor camp. A third example of human violence. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. So there's this word that I tried to access in another talk. I remembered later. I'm trying to access again. Not rigorous, but it's not coming to me. But there is a gruesome. There's a gruesome aspect to protecting the Bodhisattva heart. It's gruesome to actually do, as Eddie Hillison says, ought we not, from time to time, open ourselves to cosmic sadness? From time to time, according to one's capacity, up to the limit where we might risk doing violence to our hearts and stopping there. But to protect the Bodhisattva heart, to nurture it, from time to time, we need to feel the pain of the world. We need to contemplate. And I saw this in various news reports. The only one in Newsweek was among them that posted this video of a tank veering to deliberately roll over a sedan, a civilian sedan. And it's reputed to be a Russian tank. I think it's quite likely that that's the case. And then they backed up over it. They contemplate that. They contemplate, the elderly person who survived and was pulled out of the vehicle after the event, but also to contemplate the people in that vehicle delighting in the power of that mechanism and wanting to feel it viscerally, and just going for that hatred, going for that greed for power, and just getting off on it. To contemplate that capacity of human darkness and not to disassociate from it, but to see it as what humans can do. And I'm human. I could do that. If I grew up like that person operating that tank, if I was enculturated as that person, if I were given the opportunity to have this much power, I could become that. So, from time to time, up to one's capacity to safely do it in a way that nurtures the Bodhisattva heart. It doesn't endanger one's own individual heart, opening to the fullness of the pain, to feel the grief, to feel the horror. My joy is like spring, so warm. When I came out this morning to light the altar, light the candle, put out the greeting sticks, the birds were singing so much. I guess, it's warming up a little bit. There's lots of sunshine, and they were singing. And it was very, very, very sweet. My joy is like spring. It's not spring yet. Not yet. So warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. Bodhisattva heart is a glorious thing. In ancient philosophy, the good, the true, the beautiful were like the virtues, the ultimate virtues. And I think they're one. I think what is beautiful is also good, is also true. What is true is also beautiful, it's also good. What is good is all, etc. That's just, it's like, it's almost like the Greek Trinity, three persons in one, three qualities in one. And the limitlessness of the beauty life, the limitlessness, the inexhaustible wonder and joy of simply being alive is only accessible through the Bodhisattva heart, or that thing which might be called by other names, but we call the Bodhisattva heart. That, the fulfillment of that is only accessible from this kind of consciousness that we call the Bodhisattva heart. My joy is like spring so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the world. My pain is like a river of tears so vast it fills the four oceans. This book here says one can know beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. A heart that's open is a heart that's open. Can't be open to the birds singing this morning and closed down to the tank rolling over the Sudan in Uganda, in Ukraine, pardon me. You can't have one without the other if you're committed to protecting the Bodhisattva. Please call me by my true names so I can hear all my cries and my laughter at once. So I can see my joy and my pain as one. Please call me by my true names so that I can wake up and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. Okay, I've referenced Eddie Hillison a couple times already this morning, and I want to share her most famous quote. But before I do, just a little bit about who she is. Eddie Hillison was a young woman in Amsterdam during the Holocaust. She had letters in law and Slavic languages. And she was working, I think, as a tutor in various realms, if I recall correctly. And she suffered from bouts of depression, and she was in therapy with a Jungian analyst. And through that process of Jungian analysis, she was introduced to spiritual works like St. Augustine, Rilke, Dostoevsky, somebody else I can't remember right now. And so she was, intrigued by these works. She was Jewish, but she wasn't a practicing Jew. The Bible, the Bible was the other thing. And she read the Bible, the New Testament, but she never claimed to be a Christian. But she began to have stirrings of spiritual awakening, which increased geometrically when she began to work in a Westerbork transitional camp, housing Jews and directing them primarily to Auschwitz. She was working for the Jewish Council first as a secretary, but she felt she wanted to be with the people who were being held in the camp, so she volunteered to work in Westerbork camp. And in that camp, her status as a protected Jewish worker suddenly changed, and she became a member of the camp and sent off to Auschwitz to die. And this happened in the space of a couple years, where she started writing her diary. And I think she started writing her diary during therapy, and maybe 3 years later, she died in Auschwitz, something like that. And this diary was hidden from the world until like 1980 something, finally published, and it revealed a woman of incredible courage and vastness of heart. And so this is in the context of, in such times as war, in this case, in the context of the ignominiously named final solution. What are we to feel? How are we to navigate our feelings, our emotions? And most importantly, what to do. What to do when all doing seems futile. What to do when we feel helpless, powerless, and hopeless. So, the early portions of her diary mainly dealt with relationships. Her analyst became her lover. She had other lovers, and she was processing depression. But when she started working with and living with the people that were interred, there was a shift in tone in her diary. And like I say, this is the one that is most often quoted and drawn upon. And because her diary became, rather than a reflection about her own processes, became a reflection upon her spiritual awakening, her spiritual search. When she uses the word God, she also elsewhere in the diary talks about her problematic with the word God. It's a rather crude metaphor, but nonetheless, she accepts it as the ultimately best word to use. So here's a passage where she's in her diary writing to God, and she says, "I shall try to help you, O God, to stop my strength ebbing away, though I cannot vouch for it in advance. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear to me, that you cannot help us, that we must help you to help ourselves." So this is, on one hand, a radical theology, if you want to use this word, that God is helpless. He can't help us. She can't help us. But rather, we must help God to help ourselves. As radical as this seems, it has its roots in Jewish mysticism, Lurianic Kabbalah, which very briefly is at the time of creation, the Creator emptied himself fully into creation, not leaving anything behind, but fully, and left himself at the mercy of creation to reveal divinity. That and that the flowers, the trees do so to a certain extent, but humanity has a special role for more complete revelation of divinity. And if they don't do their part, no God. No God in the sense that he's killed or she's killed, but that the latency never becomes manifest because God has emptied herself fully into creation. And tikkun, the repair, is to bring forth that latency into actuality. And so what Eddie is speaking of here is actually mystical Judaism. And I don't know if she actually read Kabbalah or not, or just somehow intuited it. I kind of suspect she intuited it, which is remarkable if I'm right. But it's not a completely novel idea. It's radical, but it's not novel. Remember, I said the Bodhisattva heart. Right? You can never possess it. We don't have the power to actualize it, but it's a reality that we can protect, that we can nurture. So, going on, let me start over again. I shall try to help you, O God, to stop my strength ebbing away, though I cannot vouch for it in advance. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear to me, that you cannot help us, that we must help you, help ourselves. And that is all we can manage these days. So, what is all that we can manage these days for us right here, right now? He says, given this present circumstance, all we can manage these days is to help you, to help ourselves. And also, all that really matters, all in the context of this transitional camp with the tracks pointed towards Auschwitz, all that can be managed is to protect, is to help you, to help ourselves. That's all we can manage. We have no power to do anything else. And also, all that really matters, what really matters, is that we protect the deepest sense of what it means to be human in these times. That we not allow that to disappear from the face of the earth. Also, all that really matters, that we safeguard that little piece of you, God, in ourselves, and perhaps in others as well. Alas, there doesn't seem much that you yourself can do about our circumstances, about our lives. Neither do I hold you responsible. You cannot help us, but we must help you and defend your dwelling place inside us to the last. You are sure to go through lean times with me. Now and then, when my faith weakens a little bit. But believe me, I shall always labor for you and remain faithful to you, and I shall never drive you from my presence. So there is something to be done. And when the fires of samsara blaze and roar to such a great extent, it can be like a refiner's fire, clarifying what really matters most. That we protect the Bodhisattva heart, that we nurture it, nourish it, realize its nature, be in ever closer communion with it, recognizing that we are not it, it actually is us. The fullest meaning of human life is there. And that is what is threatened the most. And that would be the greatest loss. Eddie Hillison was killed, age 29. But she left a beautiful, beautiful jewel that can nourish still. She said, there is only one way of preparing the new age, by living it even now in our hearts. There's only one way of surviving the conflagration and bringing forth a redeemed world. By living a redeemed world, even now in our hearts. Not let that ever be defeated. Not let anything or anyone claim victory over that. That can be done. That can be done. It ain't easy. It's a lot of work. It's the most gruesome work and the most beautiful. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. There's something to be done. It can be done. It's kind of gruesome, but it's worth it. Okay, so I will close with a poem somewhere. I wrote it down somewhere. Yeah. Okay. By Rumi. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and scared. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down the loot. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Today, like every other day, we wake up. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and scared. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down the musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. That might be all we can manage these days, and also what really matters. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Thank you very much. May our intention equally extend to every being and place, with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.